Hey, Jerry,
Hey,
where are you?
um, I'm outside of Lima, Ohio, I think.
So really, you don't know where you are, do you?
Not exactly. I'm in Interstate 75
So
at a
we
nice little rest area.
at a rest area doing this. We couldn't get enough of Rob Lohman the last time because he has so much to share with us. And one of the things we wanted to hear a little bit more about his story and how he got involved in the recovery area. And then you probably don't remember this, but we invited, or I really invited an interventionist into our marriage, which I don't think you were even aware of. And that's another thing that Rob does. So we're going to hear a little bit more about that. So, Rob, you want to
Yeah,
introduce
no, this is
us?
going to be a surprise for me, I think. Unless the interventionist was Judge McClelland, then I knew about that.
No, this one happened long before all that stuff happened. Um, Rob, you switch hats. So we did an interview with you on Unplugged. So switch hats to your other area and tell us both about your podcast and the work you do as an interventionist.
I will definitely. Thanks for having me on the show. And Jerry, I just want to let you know this is another intervention. So here we go. We're doing it live right
All right.
now.
Oh, terrific. I'm excited. Bring it. Let the healing begin.
Yes, yes, yeah. Interventions are definitely a unique opportunity to help people, and it's a really great way to show how much families really love the individual to pull together in a tough situation, And Um, but yeah, the way I got into doing interventions was an interesting journey in itself. And I don't remember how much of my story I shared on the last show, but this is a new show, so I'll just give you kind of the snapshot in Rob Lohman and how I got into doing the world that I do.
Sure.
Because interventions have happened in my own personal family with relatives in their journeys, and I was always like, "Huh, what really is that?" Now I know firsthand what goes on with them. But I drank from 14 to 29, and I just remember putting alcohol to my lips at 14, and it was like this switch just went on. And I always say, like, alcohol became my master at that time. And I grew up in a good Christian home and all this, like, good support around, and just, we had a lot of good opportunities growing up. So it wasn't like I had a lot of trauma stuff or things that would say, I need this alcohol to make me feel better. But there was just something about it that just clicked and made me feel like I fit in, and that whole awkwardness on how I felt a lot of times just kind of gave me that calm
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
piece. And I remember I was actually at a youth event, a Young Life youth event in Fort Worth, Texas, and some kid brought a 6-pack of beer, and he said, "Hey, Lohman, you want to go have a beer?" And I'm like, "Yeah." There's two cute girls, whatever. Walked through the alleyway. I slammed my 3 beers, and they each nursed theirs. And I was like, okay, that probably should have been a sign that I was like wired for alcohol in a way.
Oh my goodness. And this was at a Young Life event.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is so crazy things happen at Christian events. I mean,
Deep breath.
well, after that, I was actually the kid that brought the flask on like the Young Life ski trip too,
Mhm.
along with another guy that I
So
won't mention his name.
just funny that the amateurs are the ones who brought the alcohol.
Yeah, yeah.
You would have thought you would.
I have this gift of leadership, they say, as a young age. So I just kind of brought everyone else along with me. But it was just, I mean, people say alcohol is everywhere, and it is everywhere. Like even in recovery now, it's like it's everywhere, but it doesn't have to be everywhere in our lives. But it was part of my life, and I'll just say the next 15 years was just a lot of lying, stealing, cheating, just crazy chaos that you wouldn't do sober. And I mean, I went to college, almost got kicked out of college a couple of times just because I did something stupid, but I talked my way out of it. So I got to stay in college,
Mhm.
and I remember going to school, going to college, and it was like this freedom because I wasn't living at home anymore. And I went out all the time when I was at home too. And it's almost like, I don't know if my parents just turned a blind eye or they just really were not, you know, cognizant. Hold on a second. I know you're going to edit this. Can you hear my Outlook going off left and right?
No, I can't.
No.
Oh, well, that's good to know because I can. So I just interrupted that. So, but it was like, I don't know if my parents just like turned a blind eye or were just oblivious, but I mean, I came home at, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning in high school and was just like you had to know I was drinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I went out during high school at lunch, and we'd go to this bar down the street and drink like these Hawaiian hula drinks that were high powered, alcohol. And then we'd go back for our last class of the day. And then my teacher she was my swim coach, and I was her teacher's assistant. And she was like, "Yeah, just go do whatever. I'll see you at practice." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So,
Whatever.
yeah. So senior year, I quit swim. I was a good swimmer too, but I quit swimming just because I was drinking before I went to practice. So I was like half drunk driving across town to go. So that's just what I did. College came, I graduated in 4 years. Somehow I was like the first person in my family to graduate in 4 years from college by the skin of my teeth. But I wasn't motivated. I was a smart kid. So if I had to get an A on a test, I would study for a little while and just ace it.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, it wasn't a high interest of mine. Sorry, Mom and Dad. They spent a lot of money on college. I've made those amends to them verbally, which was pretty nuts. So anyway, let's see what happened after that. Graduated college, moved out to, with a nice $125,000 college degree. Not going to go to medical school like I wanted to. Moved out to Vail, Colorado, like, you do after you graduate with a degree.
Sure.
For 18 months. And it was just, I was going out to really kind of figure out what I wanted to do with my life, because I really didn't know. But what I found out I wanted to do was get high and get drunk all the time. And so that's what I did for 18 months in Vail.
Yeah, you were in the right place.
No, yeah. I mean, when I graduated, I totaled my car before my senior year of college in a drunk driving accident. Should have died. My car flipped end over end like 6 times, but I didn't have a scratch on me. It was like nothing happened. So I always believed God was keeping me alive for a bigger purpose. And I kind of bought into that and took advantage of that, because, I mean, I would jump out of, boats going 55 miles an hour just to jump out of them. Where I can jump into that tree and I'm like, oh, that hurt, but no broken bones,
That's right.
But after, Vail, I promised my parents I'd only go for 18 months. And it was like 18 months to the day I moved back to Dallas or Fort Worth, Texas, and then slowly moved over to Dallas, and just a lot of life stuff. I mean, I had a good job in, commercial real estate, and I went back to get my MBA. I had a good alcoholic marriage for a short period of time, based on nothing pure but drinking and partying and things that go in between there. And then after I graduated with my MBA, I moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and was working for my uncle doing commercial real estate. I had a 6-state region that I was in charge of. So
lots of driving.
Yes. Jerry, you know what driving is. I don't do any driving like you do, but it was like, driving in my car with my dog to sales appointments or whatever. But when you're, an alcoholic, you like to do drugs and you like to gamble, it was just like, oh, I'm going up to Cadillac, Michigan to get some work done. But I would literally just go to the casinos, whatever. Just stupid. I looked good. I was fit, had girlfriends, but I went out 8 nights a week.
Oh.
And I drank and drove every night.
And no accident. You said you had an accident, but you didn't harm anybody. By the grace of God, you didn't.
I always say, as far as I know, because I was a blackout person also. So I just pray that I never did hurt anybody, and to this day, I don't know that I ever have,
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in those states and towards the end of my drinking, we're now in the year 2001. I had this desire to better my life, and because I had ambition and just like, I'm a creative guy and everything, but I was just stuck in this cycle of, drinking, drugging, sleeping around, drinking, drugging, sleeping around, and just kind of, close the bars down. And I would drive. So you were just recently in Indiana, Jerry. Foreman, Indiana is the northern part of Indiana, and about 2 hours kind of northwestish is a place called Gary, Indiana, where they have casinos.
Yeah, I went right through it.
Okay. Yeah, so casinos all over that place, right? So back in 2001, like Fort Wayne had video poker where you could actually play for money. Then the bar would pay you out. So I'd find these little dives, and I would go gamble there, close the bar down, drive to this casino, come back, wake up in the morning and I would have these poker chips in my pocket. And I'm like, or on my bed or somewhere. And I'm like, oh no, I went to the casinos again, but I didn't remember the drive.
Oh my.
So you got 2 hours there, 2 hours back. Sometimes I go in the middle of winter, and just like 5, 6, 7 hours of blackouts. My poor dog went with me. So, poor Jake went through some hell being my dog, but I treated him well, except in my blackouts, I would say. I don't,
Sure.
you stay in the car, I'll be back. But it started getting to the point where like that was scaring me. And I would, be driving down the highway, like going to work sober, but yet hungover from the night before, or thinking about the drink that night. But I would be driving down, I-69 in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I would literally see my car veer off the road and hit a median in the middle of the highway and blow up, and I would be dead. So I started seeing myself die, but I wasn't telling anybody, because if I told you that, you may not want to go have coffee with me or do a business deal. And the end of my journey with that was I was hanging out in a bar at Fort Wayne, Indiana, lots of music, lots of people around, and I loved being around a lot of people, but yet I also felt alone when I was around a lot of people, like introvert, extrovert kind of guy. And all of a sudden the bar got completely dead silent. And I audibly heard, "You're done." And then the bar got really loud again. And I looked at my buddy, Sean O'Brien. I'm like, dude, I got to go home. I don't know what just happened, but I think I'm done drinking. And so I drove home, like sober and drunk, kind of like my mind's like racing, but I'm like thinking clearly, but I'm hammered, but whatever. So I walk into my 1-bedroom apartment in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's up like 15 stairs in my loft apartment. Laid down on my workout bench after I had just put about 350 pounds on the barbell. Picked up the bar and dropped it in an attempt to suicide.
Oh my.
Yeah. But in the moments, they're literally like split seconds, because as I unhinge my elbows to drop it, the dog Jake is nudging my knee, looking up at me like, "Dad, what are you doing?" And my first thought is, who's going to feed you tomorrow morning? And then I start thinking about my parents and like, good. I mean, this is all like lightning fast speed going through my brain because I'm still holding a lot of weight above me that I cannot hold.
Sure.
And then the bar was held back, and I feel like, and I believe it was God that was holding that weight to put it back on the rack in this moment. And a friend of mine recently, I think it was today or yesterday, she said, that's kind of symbolic, don't you think? That God will never give you more than you can handle.
So the "I'm done," go back to the "I'm done."
Yeah.
Was that a divine intervention too?
Yeah. No, I believe I heard, "You're done."
Wow.
And then while I'm working on the bench, laying on the bench, and I'm just sitting there, like momentarily sitting there. It's like, I just know that was God holding that bar, because I could bench maybe 200 by myself, not 350. And there was just something different right after that moment, because I felt God's peace, and I just believed everything was going to be all right. And I poured out my 2 full bottles of like $70 scotch, because I had to be sophisticated in my addiction. But I mean, I can see all this happening as I tell you this, and the drops of alcohol like bouncing out of the sink as I pour it down. And I just slept in peace that night, and the next morning I meant to call my aunt. She'd been sober a very long time. She lived in Fort Wayne. But I called my parents and said, "Mom, Dad, I can't quit drinking and drugging, and I need some help." And my mom says I cried for an hour. She cried for an hour. My aunt picked me up, took me to a AA meeting back in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in the back of a bar. That was my first AA meeting of willingness, I will say.
Right.
Back in college, I got sentenced to AA after I got arrested once, and I just wasn't ready. But now I was ready, and I sat down, and these people were like laughing and like having fun and talking. And I remember my aunt talked to me about kind of finding a sponsor, find someone I identify with at the meeting. And so a friend of mine, Bill, was sitting there, and I was like, "Hey, you want to be my sponsor?" He's like, "Yeah." And I just, I dove into recovery. I just dove into recovery, and I loved it, and in recovery, I had a lot of transitions. I mean, a lot of cool things have happened in recovery. And I want to get into why I got into interventions here in a second. But, so strategic moves, checking with my sponsor, say, "Hey, I'm thinking about moving here. Here's why." logical
Right.
reasons. So I moved to like Charlotte, North Carolina, and there's a recovery community in Charlotte. So it was an easy move, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then just thinking I want to do something bigger in my life. So I got a job as a college career counselor in Indiana University, and I moved up there, you know, and then it was, I thought I should travel the country in an RV and interview people on why they love what they do. So I ended up reaching out to all these people, and I wrote a book about their lives and why they love what they do and made a documentary about it.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
We're going to have to put that
Yeah.
in. What's the title of the book?
It's called The Momentum Journey Breakdown at Exit 63.
Awesome.
And it looks like this.
I've been trying to get Jerry to sell up and get in an RV, and you know what he did? He left me and got in his own shell in his own truck. I'm like, what?
It's like an
I'm
RV.
the one that loves
It's
to
got
travel.
a microwave.
Why are you
Yeah,
traveling, Goose? That's awesome. What an awesome book.
Yeah,
and did you stay sober from that? I mean, was that
yeah.
it?
No, oh yeah. So I mean, go back to the day that day. Like I didn't go through detox or withdrawal or anything. Like literally, it was like God just went, "You're done." And I have never had a craving in all the chaos. I'll tell you, or a thought of drinking. Now, what I'll tell you is gambling stuck around.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so the process addiction world of gambling did stick around, reared its ugly head here and there. But it was like after the book in the Momentum Journey Breakdown at Exit 63 tells the story of Big Red, the RV, and how it died and it broke down, which led me to Colorado in 2004.
Awesome.
And I just kind of plugged in the recovery community, started interviewing people, was on like TV shows, radio shows. It was a lot of fun. And then I ran out of money as a good entrepreneur and didn't know how to like fund this passion.
Sure.
So just kind of started doing carpentry work with people, learning the trades. And then at a worship service at church, there was this big vision that came in of putting on a 3-day Christian music festival in the mountains of Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something God put on my heart. And I checked in with a bunch of people about it. I was like, well, obviously it's not from you because you don't know what the heck you're doing and you don't play music and you've never done anything like this. So this whole entire thing, momentum began to build. And I meet my wife in 2006, who works for K-Love Radio, the largest Christian radio station in the world.
Right. We listen to K-Love.
Yeah, K-Love's awesome, 91.1 in Denver. And but through that, I just met all these people, and I ended up getting a big boy job during that, selling software while I was working on this music festival. And, you know, there's a lot of dynamics in my whole story. Like each segment's like a 2-hour talk, right, of what that's done in the chaos. But the God Rally Project ended up happening in 2008 over in Rifle, Colorado.
Say that one more time. I kind of lost you on that.
That was the God Rally Project.
God Rally Project. All right. Over in Rifle, not too far from us, really.
Yeah, it was where it was. We had about 15,000 people over 3 days that came to this free event. And
wow, you quadrupled the county population there.
I didn't know what was going on. I mean, literally, it was like Jesus just came into town. But it was 3 days, and it was 72 bands and speakers on 7 stages. And opportunities in recovery have been like incredibly crazy because I couldn't fathom writing a book, doing a documentary, doing a concert, running a marathon in Rome, Italy, like all this crazy stuff I've been able to do.
Okay, slow down, Rob. So you got in recovery, you did the cross-country van trip. So that's exciting, right? Sober life is not purpose. Not boring. Sober on purpose is not boring.
Yeah.
You did the cross-country van trip. You wrote a book based on the interviews. You switched to Colorado. Then you put together a music rally for 15,000 people, 1,500 people.
That's what they say, Kane. 15,000 people.
15,000 people. And if you don't live in Colorado, Rifle is like nowhere. I don't know where they all stayed. They probably brought their tents and their vans and their.
We had camping. We had camping on the ground, so it was cool.
Then you did all that. Then you did a documentary, and then you ran a marathon in Rome. Did you run with the Bulls?
Well, no, I didn't run with the Bulls, but the marathon happened in 2003 when I was single, and my grandpa had diabetes, so I decided to run for that. But also there was a really cute girl that was running it too. It helped me motivate me to want to do that. But, you know, it was a different perspective on relationships being sober also.
Right,
you know?
right.
And So then we fast forward to, let's say 2008, after the God Rally Project happened. I've now been married 2 years. I have a son that's a year old now, and I'm in computer software sales. They closed my division. So a friend of mine says, hey, you should start an insurance company.
Why not?
Great idea when you have young kids. So I jump into that, and I know a lot of people. I have a big network of people. So I thought, hey, this is something I could do. Recovery tells me I can do anything. Christ tells me I can do anything in Christ. So it's like, hey, as long as I do it right. Hardest thing I've ever done. Being a new father, a new husband, starting an insurance agency where you hit numbers or you lose your commissions. And my wife worked in Caleb still, so she worked nights and weekends. I was working nights and weekends. Our kids didn't sleep very well. My daughter was born in 2010. All right. So, but as I started getting too busy with work, my life started being lived more out of fear than out of my faith. I wasn't really strong enough in who I really was inside. And so these messages of wherever they were coming from, that doesn't necessarily matter for this talk, but you're not good enough or whatever, or you can't do it. And I would just start believing these negative messages.
So let me stop you right there. So how many years had you been sober?
So I got sober in 01. Let's just say we're now in 2010. So 9 years later.
So 9 years later, after, I imagine you feel like a lot of sober people, you kind of got the sober thing conquered. This fear comes in. And with the fear, you're looking at what? I mean, did you look back at the drinking, the gambling, and the drugging, or where did you look?
No, I never thought of drinking or drugs ever. Like, I literally have never thought about it since I got sober, that it would be a good idea. But where it wasn't even that I had like sobriety conquered. It was just, I need to get another deal done to pay my bills.
So financial fear.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Success, those types of things.
Financial fear. My marriage wasn't the best either. We argued a lot, and because a lot of it was financially driven. We didn't have the money for this, and we weren't on the same page with a lot of stuff, but we also weren't even, like, you could even say really a couple, because we were so busy that we weren't connected.
We don't know anything about that, do we, Jerry?
Nope, we've got that part nailed. We're good.
Yeah, thanks for making me feel really good, guys.
Oh, come on, Rob.
I know.
Look at us. My husband decides to leave his job where I didn't see him and not take a job where we could see him more, but take a job where he leaves. So we've got our little issues going on too.
Yeah.
Thank God for Zoom. God has created the Zoom method for our relationship.
Podcasting as marriage therapy.
Think about back in the day, like, where they literally, like, husband, or usually it was the husband that took off for sales routes around a huge territory. It's not like they ever saw each other. You couldn't do this cool stuff with video conferencing, and it was just like, hey, this is just the way it is. We'll see you when you get back for a couple of days, and off you go again. And I mean, I can't think of, like, I just saw a movie last night called Indivisible. Great movie. And it's just about the struggle of, like, men and women that go off to war, and the families left behind, and the dynamics that change in their life, and just the struggle and the balances and the PTSD and all the, with alcoholics too and addicts, it's like the PTSD that happens, and don't know why you're acting the way you're acting, but you're still being a jerk. I'm sorry, but it's just crazy dynamics. And that's kind of the way our marriage was, in a way. It was like, she'd be in an event, I'd be in an event. It was just too much of this. And so fear definitely was ruling my life at this time. My daughter was born in 2010. So now we're jumping to 2011. I was about to lose my agency because of sales and production numbers. A lot of factors led into that, with rate changes and just spiritual attacks of people that listen to your show or believers. It was just kind of like this whirlwind of distractions and busyness. So you can't focus on what's the most important thing, which is what? Your family.
Absolutely.
Myself.
Absolutely.
And I don't say it selfishly, but I have to love myself so much that I can love my family incredibly well. And not from a self-centered, egotistical way, but it's like, if I don't like who I am, which at this point in my life, I hated who I was. but I wasn't telling anybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I would be like sitting in my insurance office, knowing I was like imminent doom was coming to like lose my agency because I needed so many policies to catch up after like all of our rates changed and all those things, you know. And in that, I would sit in my insurance office and I would stare at all this paperwork, like having no clue where to begin.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I would take my fist and I would hit myself in the side of the head, and and it would shock me to the point where I'm like, oh, it's kind of like now I woke up. Now I know what to do, because gamblers, addicts, people that have like really low dopamine levels, because our dopamine hits come from the thrill of whatever's going on.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. So there wasn't enough stimulation.
Right.
Or there was too much.
Yeah, it was too much, or not enough, or whatever. And that was my way, which I learned now, of self-harming myself. Some people cut, some people go have an affair or whatever, but mine was like, and I wasn't telling anybody. I'd be sitting in my office and just going, and I would like see a flash of light like in my like brain, you know, and I'm like, oh, okay, I can get that paperwork done, and then I go home, you know, and kind of avoiding my wife too, because we weren't like doing great, and it was like easy to hide in your office, you know, it's like it's miles away, you know, so just a lot of unhealthy stuff. And so I lose my agency November 2011. My wife quit her job at Caleb December 2011 because she was so exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
We were both exhausted, you know, and she gave a 4-month notice to kind of train the next person up into her position. And since I lost my business, I couldn't say, hey, honey, I know I lost my business. This really sucks. Can you just stay in your job that you're like not satisfied with anymore?
Mm-hmm.
So I never stopped to pause and think about, like, you have totally failed as a husband and a father and all these messages. I just went to the next thing, which was look for a job, work on a side business. And then a couple of months later, February 2012, I was up late one night. Family had already gone to bed. A lot of like triggers were happening in my life that just reminded me how great I wasn't, and how I'd failed in life, and just a lot of depression and stuff happening, and anxiety. And family went to bed, and I was up looking for a job and working on a side business. And I was like, forget this. I'm just going to organize the townhouse, which was in complete disorganization because we were remodeling our kitchen.
Right.
That had happened before. And it was like, I get up, and in the midst of starting to put stuff away, I have a mental blackout and just disappear for a minute and grab a box of matches, lit some boxes on fire on my covered patio. And then I came to in a mental fog, and I was like, holy bleep,
Right.
what did I just do?
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't stop it. And so I shut the sliding glass door, ran upstairs, ripped Jen out of bed. She grabs my 2-year-old daughter out of her crib. I grabbed my 4-year-old son out of his bed. We run downstairs. Fire's still outside, you know, just building, and it was a carpeted patio, and just a lot of our stuff was out there from the kitchen, and it was just building in heat. But I mean, we're naive. I don't know what's really happening, but it's still outside. So I ran outside and beat my neighbors' doors and wake them up. Meanwhile, we already called the fire department. They're all showing up. There's cop cars, fire trucks. It's like a war zone. My brain's spinning a million miles a minute. Like,
oh my goodness,
what have I done? Holy crap, my family, we need to get out. So I go inside, and, you know, right when my wife, my 2 kids, and my dog and I walk out the front door, the backdraft caught, according to fire investigators, and completely exploded our covered patio.
Oh no.
Blew out the windows. Like, it was the loudest sound I've ever heard in my own head. And the gas meter had melted. So there was natural gas cooking in there, and that's what caused the massive explosion. And miraculously, like, nobody physically got hurt.
Oh, praise God. That's amazing that everybody got out.
Oh yeah. I mean, tons of emotional damage and financial and structural and just material damage, but nobody got hurt at all. And I remember sitting in or we walked around the building, and my kids never saw the fire. I mean, they were so young, but we just protected them. But they never even saw the fire. They just know we had one.
Right.
And And it just started this whirlwind of what the heck happened.
Right.
It was awful. And the next 2.5, 3 weeks, I was lying about what happened. I made up a story on how it happened. And I'm just trying to figure out how do I, one, protect my family. And part of me is still like, how do I get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'm like, dude, you can't. Like, there were like 5 fire trucks here, and like, you're going to prison. Like, just get ready. And so what happened next? So it was just, my wife thought I actually had done it.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I'm a jerk off and a arsonist, but I was like, we were so spent and so desperate, you know? And so she would ask me, I'm like, honey, no, I didn't do it. Like, I would get defensive and just trying to cover it up.
Hey, thank you for listening to this episode with Rob Lohman. We had a lot of fun interviewing him. We interviewed him pre-pandemic, and since then, he has written a book called Addiction Intervention. And I hope it pops up right here. It'll be in the links below. These are stories of different styles of interventions. There isn't just one. There's all kinds of different things the family can do. They talk about CRAFT, which is community reinforcement training, which really helps the loved ones of the person who is dealing with substance abuse. They talk about how the family can help, how the family can support after the person has become sober. And Rob very carefully details out who and when to contact and how an interventionist really works. So if you're tired of just seeing things on TV and want to know real answers, Addiction Intervention by Rob Lohman. Get it now on Amazon or go directly to his site. Links below.